Welcome to this episode of the Civil War Digital Digest. I'm your host Jeremy, and we're back on campaign and on the march, and we're getting ready to cook our meal. I got some fresh beef issued here. I'm cooking a recipe with directions out of the Handbook for Active Service, which was published in 1861. It's got great information about guard, drill, and in particular rations. So the one that I picked out of the Handbook for Active Service is to fry meat of any kind. And the first step of that is to actually melt some pork fat and get it nice and hot, which we've already done. And then to take some salt and pepper on whatever meat it is that you got issued, and to lay it down into the pork fat to fry. Pretty straightforward there, but there's a nice twist at the end. That makes this a little bit special, and it'll be really nice for my partner and I to eat after a day's marching. So we're gonna put that back on the fire and back on the coals and give that a minute to crisp up and to cook through. So while I'm cooking this up, my part here is resting, but earlier he got the firewood, he got water for the coffee pot and for our canteens. And while he did that, I was setting up the shelter. And now I'm gonna cook and he's getting a rest, and I was resting some after we got the shelter while he was gathering firewood. That's one of the great things that having pards along with you, that division of labor, being to help each other out. You know, if you're tired after that march, there's so many things that you still want to do before you bed down, and dividing that out is really important. Should be getting there. It looks like our meat's ready, so I'm going to get on to what really makes this a special meal. One thing that soldiers were issued was vinegar. And might be really curious about what you would do with the vinegar. And this is just one such recipe where you can actually use it. So the Handbook for Active Service states now to actually add in some water, and then a couple teaspoons of our vinegar ration. And we're going to get that back on the fire and get it hot. And really what we're going to be doing is making a nice gravy. And once I get that hot, actually I have some flour to thicken it up, and then we're going to pour that over the meat. So I've got back on the fire our water, our couple teaspoons of vinegar ration, and I want to let that come to a nice simmer to be able to get the bits of pork fat and the beef off the bottom of the pan, which is really going to make this a good gravy and a nice treat after a long day. While this water's warming up, partner here are going to sit back and relax, and I'll be right back with you. Coming up to a nice simmer and a boil, just kind of just scrape it along the sides and the bottom of the pan to get all of those juices and all those little bits for the gravy. Then we're going to let that simmer for a minute and start to thicken up. You can see some of the flour clumped up. That's just the nature of it. Not a gourmet meal at home, but a meal on campaign. One trick you could do if you really don't want the lumps, and this isn't in the active handbook service, but you could transfer some of that hot liquid into another container, mix in the flour in another container and kind of make a slurry. And then you can pour it into the pan, and then you're less likely to end up with all of these lumps. After being on the march, neither one of us are really concerned with it. So we've given this a couple of minutes at a nice good simmer, and I'd say it's thickened up and it's rendered down a little bit, and it looks delicious. You ready for the meal? So the final step that the Active Service Handbook talks about is just pouring the gravy onto the meat and enjoying. So we're going to do that right now. We'll save a little bit for later too. All right, let's give this a try. It's really good. The vinegar adds just a little bit of sourness, which is a little different, not something you necessarily expect. Well, it's also kind of refreshing on this warm, sunny day as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Civil War Digital Digest. I know I've enjoyed doing it and continuing to see ways that you can connect with history when you're out in the field as a living historian, or continuing to get a better understanding of what the soldiers did when they were out on campaign. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that subscribe button and like and share it out with your friends. Until next time, thank you.